Jelena, I will call you in a moment once the presentation is underway, but good afternoon. My name is Natalia Wehmer. I'm your MC for this forum, and I want to warmly welcome everybody to session 6, the last substantive session of our forum, and it will discuss the topic of strengthening supply chains and connectivity through regional partnerships. First, some brief housekeeping announcements. Please note that this forum is bilingual in English and Russian, and that you can select the language you want to listen to by clicking on the respective interpretation channel. On behalf of our interpreters, I want to inform you that our interpreters will alternate every 20 minutes. Speakers and participants are requested to be mindful of the additional difficulties experienced by interpreters when working in remote mode and of the increased likelihood of disruptions to the audio feed to the interpreters. Only the speech or intervention in the original language constitutes an authentic record of the proceedings. Also, interpreters servicing remote meetings cannot be held liable for interruption of service, pixelation, freezing or loss of visual input, partial or complete loss of audio, audible artifacts, unauthorized access to personal or confidential data, leaking of information due to inadequate soundproofing, and/or data loss. Participants joining us on YouTube live stream can throughout the session post questions on the YouTube chat. Our colleagues will select and forward some of your questions to the moderator. Those questions that we have no time to answer here, we will answer in a summary format in writing and post on our ESCAP forum webpage. With these housekeeping announcements out of the way, I now would like to give the floor to our moderator for this session, Ms. Aja Jaimurzina Ducre, Chief Transport Facilitation and Logistics Section of the Transport Division of ESCAP. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Natalia. Good afternoon to everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the last substantive session of the forum that will be dedicated to strengthening global supply chains and regional connectivity through partnerships. And it is my pleasure to be moderating the substantive session. My name is, as was said, Aja Jaimurzina Ducre. I am a Chief of Transport Connectivity and Logistics Section of the UNESCAP Transport Division. And I'm very pleased to be joined in this discussion by a wide range of speakers from UNESCAP Secretariat, but also from our key partners in the region representing the international financial institutions, regional cooperation mechanisms, and of course the representative from the private sector. During our session today, we will be focusing on discussing how the landscape of supply chains and connectivity has been evolving and changing and in North and Central Asia. We will be, of course, paid a lot of attention to the latest development related to the COVID-19 pandemics. But as our discussion will progress, I'm sure we will unpack some underlying and long-term trends and challenges that we can only address through strengthened regional cooperation, be it at the level of sectoral organizations or wider partnerships, and of course, financial support from multilateral development institutions. So we will start with the initial presentation that will set the scene for our discussion, and we will then go into the panel exchange where all of our panelists present today will be introduced, of course, and then share their thoughts on the main topics of our session. At the end of this session, we will have a question and answer time. So we will ask all of our presenters to kindly keep to the timeline, very tight timeline for our session, so we can accommodate the questions from the public. So this is the layout for the session. This is a program, a very intense program, and an excellent lineup of speakers who I will introduce as we go into the discussion mode. But let us start by setting the scene for this discussion and by sharing some initial thoughts, ideas, and data available from UNESCAP, both from the transport, connectivity, and the trade side. And for that framing initial presentation, I have the pleasure to have with us Mia Mikic. She is the director of the Trade, Investment and Innovation Division of UNESCAP. And she has put together for us the best of the latest thoughts that UNESCAP has to offer on trade, global change, and connectivity. Mia, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Azar, and thank you very much for raising the expectations for my presentation. Of course, I would have loved to have more time, and I'm going to have to fly through the presentation that was actually jointly prepared by the team from Trade, Investment, Innovation, and Transport divisions. So let me go straight into the next slide. What I intend to do here, as Azar said, is really set the scene for the panel discussion. So the point of this very brief presentation is to just pinpoint the major issues that have been pushed to the surface through the COVID-19 pandemic, and then to look into what countries and ESCAP have been doing and tease out some of the possibilities or the opportunities for the regional partnership to take further and to help countries to meet these challenges. So I don't think I need to dwell a lot about the impacts of pandemic. We are still, of course, catching up with statistics, because statistics actually follows up with the lag in giving us the actual number of the changes and the impacts in socioeconomic spheres. We just by observing around us, we are very much aware on the impact of livelihoods, on the impact of employment, impact on trade and all the other economic activities. You do have some numbers on the screen. They are actually quite already obsolete, because they refer to the first quarter of this year, and there are some updates on our website that you are welcome to look at. Let me just very quickly say that the impact is not, of course, equal on all the sectors and all the activities. The sectors that are more linked and associated with mobility of people have been impacted much more. This refers to all the services that require physical presence, and also other activities that are related to mobility of people, tourism, of course, travel, retail, etc. On the real side economy, in terms of manufacturing, of course, the demand has impacted quite a bit of the sectors that relate to more of long-term purchases or higher price items, so electronics to some degree, and of course cars, etc., have been impacted, but also labor-intensive activities like textile and apparel and some others. There are activities that have benefited. They are all related to being able to digitally use digital platforms and being enabled digitally, and also the parts of the business sector that is more agile and more able to actually quickly react to the changes in demand and supply. Uncertainty that is all around us has affected investment very badly, and so in all activities the investments are actually down. May I have next slide, which describes just in few lines the parts of the impacts on this global value chains, supply chains that we are discussing here as well. So there are two sides of impacts. One is in terms of actually producing goods through the value chains, through putting together different parts and components that require the transport supply chains movement across the borders. So this has been impacted by both supply and demand chain sides, and then of course the transport sector has been impacted very significantly. Next slide, please. And in what we see here is that, of course, not all types of transport have been impacted the same. I think the most is the air transport because that, of course, relates to the mobility of people that has been stopped, as we know, and the ability to convert part of that into freight and cargo has not been in full. So this has been definitely affecting the ability to move the some of the parts and components through the value chains in there. However, the infrastructure for transport that is related to road and railway and sea or maritime has not been affected in a way it would have been if we had a natural disaster or something. So the infrastructure is there. The issue is really about how do we enable that infrastructure through access of people to the facilities that need to be done, and then of course combine it with all the other containment measures that have been put in place by the governments to try to stop the spread of the virus. The impact in terms of the volume of transport and the turnover is significant, and some of the statistics show that the recovery will not be that fast in many sectors. But what is also important is that the impact of through this transport sector capacity reduction and the price increase on the overall trade costs. In some of the goods, the transport costs can actually contribute up to 30% of the overall trade costs, and therefore we are seeing in the next slide an increase in the trade cost for almost all the sub-regions in ESCAP region. Next slide, please. And so in our trade cost database that we track these trade costs for countries individually, but also sub-regions, we can see this upward trend. And this, of course, it will impact the competitiveness of countries as they move into the recovery of from the economic impacts of this crisis. Next slide, please. So when we are talking about the responses to these adverse impacts of the pandemic, we have seen many of the responses at the country level, and then of course we have seen some at the higher level of the sub-regions, and also the responses from international organizations as ESCAP. And let me just give some sort of review of the policies that countries have been attempting to put in place very quickly in order to facilitate, to enable cross-border transactions, of course, particularly in the essential goods and goods that were declared as very important to deal with the emergencies in terms of the health sector, or in terms of some of the production of the essential technological goods to enable and facilitate these flows. They do, however, come at the tail end of the first knee-jerk reaction of countries that were looking inwards and trying to close the national territories and prevent the exchange across the borders. But very quickly, I think countries have realized that such policies would be backfiring, and so then they have directed their reactions, their responses towards the facilitation policies. They have opened green channels. They have put in place temporary measures that rely on electronic clearance of goods, etc. That have helped a lot in moving ahead with shifts of some of the goods across the borders. Now, in terms of next slide, please. And we, of course, have a tracker of all of these policies on the ESCAP website, and you are most welcome to have a look at these as well. Can you skip this slide, because we are running a little bit behind time, and I want to save some time. Next slide, please. So in terms of ESCAP, I think it is important to see that we have reacted very quickly to work with the member states and to help in any way we can in terms of putting in place proper policies and initiatives to respond to these. So in terms of helping countries to understand the impact, we of course have initiatives and platforms that provide analytical inputs and analysis of the impact that will help them not only in this short-term situation, but also moving on with through the exit, and then taking normal sort of policies again. So this is part of the assessment and understanding the impact of the policies themselves, and then selection of the proper reactions. Then we have a sector of policies that are helping countries to basically look at how to harmonize the responses and how to help come with sort of a model type of responses that would allow also traders and producers to be able to save costs, because they would be facing a sort of a standardized or harmonized containment policies or measures in terms of that. And so we are looking at how to enhance the coordination and the harmonization of these responses. And then, of course, we are looking at mobilizing the existing platforms that are being provided through the ESCAP operation with the countries in terms of framework agreements and treaties for countries to enhance their cooperative and collaborative policies to be able to move forward with that. Next slide, please. And so we are hoping that we can put forward these ESCAP initiatives to our other partners and the partners of the countries in terms of dialogue or development, so that we can enhance the impact of collaborative practices. And so I think increasing transparency by working with the other sub-regional or regional organizations and exchanging information that are available to them to be available to all would definitely provide a very positive outcome. And then, of course, we need to look at how to enhance not only investment in infrastructure, but also help with guarantees in terms of trade finance and other finance to the private sector through the development banks and through the other sort of financial initiatives that may exist, one of which is also aid for trade that can be utilized. So let me stop there and thank you all for paying attention to this short presentation. And I hope that through the panelists' intervention, we can come back to some of these and discuss this in much further detail. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mia. And the presentation will be, of course, made available to all the colleagues, and the data that we've been able to gather so far, and the assessment, as well as the work that is done by UNESCO, will, of course, be shared with everyone. And I think, Mia, in your presentation, you've really captured, it's a mixture of the new and the old. It's the mixture of the new because of the impact of the pandemic, because of the challenge of that magnitude that we have rarely faced. But one of your slides showed the trade costs and the performance of our sub-region in the trade, in the competitiveness and the integration in the global supply chains. And I think we know already that it is an area of focus. It's an area of certain weakness in the region, and of course the crisis has highlighted a lot of good and also a lot of bad. And it was and this is something that we jointly assess together with our trade colleagues and with Mia's team and UNESCO. From the transport perspective, we've seen tremendous efforts by the countries in trying to keep their borders open for freight and trying to maintain the regional transport and trade connectivity. So I think this is your initial presentation, Mia, gave us this this nuanced message of what is happening with the connectivity and trade in North and Central Asia. And in this regard, I think what we have now is an excellent selection of speakers from various horizons who will share their opinion and their initial views on the subject matter. And what I would like to propose is that we start with the very open-ended questions. I think Mia's presentation has really highlighted that we've seen in this ongoing situation the traditional or emerging areas of weaknesses in connectivity, in supply chain integration in North and Central Asia. And we would like to hear the opinion of the colleagues present here for the panel to see what are, in their views, these emerging or traditional challenges that North and Central Asia faces, that were highlighted, that were exacerbated by the crisis, and what would that tell us in terms of our own priorities. And the idea for this open-ended question is trying to see and points of convergence and alliance and partnerships, so we can then zoom in on what we can jointly do together. So with that in mind, let me move to our first panelist, and I'm very pleased to confirm that we have with us Mr. Andrei Panteleev, head of the Economic Policy Strategy sections of Macroeconomic Policy Department of Eurasian Economic Commission. As you know, Eurasian Economic Commission is really a key player in our region, and very actively and successfully mobilizes efforts of its member states in terms of ensuring connectivity and trade. So I would like to give the floor to you, Andrei, and see what you can share with us based as a reaction to initial presentation and your own thoughts. Thank you.
Здравствуйте, Ажар. Меня слышно, видно?
Ажар, we can hear and we can now see you. Да, мы слышим вас, но не видим. Но, пожалуйста, продолжайте разговор. Самое главное, что вы в эфире. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. That is a big pleasure to me to participate at this sub-regional multi-stakeholders forum dedicated to the SDGs. Currently, the Eurasian Economic Commission, a subnational regulator of Eurasian Economic Union, is very active in terms of analyzing repercussions of pandemic to the Eurasian Economic Union, we are also focusing on assessing measures taken by the Commission as well as drafting further steps to develop the Union after the pandemic. I would like to voice some of the outcomes of our activities for our participants. The first thesis which I would like to start with is that the main impact on economics and dynamics of our country mostly was not by the pandemic itself, but rather shocking fall of energy prices, and this is because that we have dominated economies in our union represented by Russia and Kazakhstan. More than that, I could say that had different details, it hit differently our hit by coronavirus. It were mostly hit in terms in textile sector because the supply chain was interrupted China and services such as transport and entertainment and hospitality were mostly hit by the virus itself. And that is why the economic downturn was less sensitive because some of the services remained in demand during even lockdown. And the impact of pandemic was less sensitive to those countries which were less involved into the global supply chains. In other words, as a less involvement of a given economy into the global supply chain and global market was the impact of coronavirus pandemic on a given state or economy. What kind of measures were taken by us? These were of two groups. The first one, this measures aimed at curbing the spread of mainly focused and shutting down temporarily some supporting
пандемии. И здесь мы также реализовывали два пакета мер. То есть первые меры — это меры срочного характера, которые принимались в таких сферах, как таможенно-тарифное регулирование,
such as customs regulation, sanitary and phytosanitary measures, labor migration, and others. What were the measures in particular? Particularly, we freed and exempt some goods, especially medical goods, from customs duties. At the same time, there was a ban for exportation of this goods from the Eurasian Economic Union, such as disinfectants, for instance. So we also significantly simplified certificates provisions, and we also significantly ease customs clearance for agricultural goods in particular. Next, measures were focused on providing coordination to our countries through dialogue platforms where representatives of our countries could discuss their ongoing issues. So that was during the acute phase of pandemic in April and May. There were high-level meetings with the participation of prime ministers and line ministers. We exchanged information.
Которые принимали наши
was monitoring all measures taken by the countries, thus, and so the measures, those measures which seemed to be rather effective, so they tried to roll them out to other countries. In addition, the Commission is working on implementation of the so-called green transport corridors, meaning safe corridors for freight and other shipments within Eurasian Economic Union. In addition, targeted assistance issues were discussed, including a humanitarian one. And the third block of my presentation is how we're going to move further. How do we see our future development? The pandemic showed that traditional approaches to business should be changed, as well as governmental regulation. But nevertheless, such issues as transport, connectivity, and value-added issues are still topical. So they all proved how uninterrupted and seamless transportation is really important, thus including transportation of goods and specifically food products. This will be one of the key areas for the Commission in our strategy of integration development through 2025, included coordination, strengthening and coordination of transport policy, harmonization of transport services and their delivery, establishment of digital ecosystems, development of transport and logistics, and encouraging, promoting the production entities which would allow to establish value-added value chains. Excuse me for interruption. I think we'll have the opportunity to address these issues in your second part of your intervention. And take consideration time constraints. Can you please finalize your first part of your intervention? Okay, thank you very much, Ajar. I would like to emphasize two issues. The first one, that we, within the framework of transport connectivity, are working on connecting Eurasian integration and Chinese initiative, One Road, One Belt, One Belt, One Road. And we're working on the development of big Eurasian partnerships. So to attain SDG number 17, we're working on the concept of this idea. So that would be the end of my presentation. Thank you.
You short, but I'm sure we will have the opportunity to unpack a couple of very concrete initiatives that you are moving forward. And from our side, I would like to share that when we were looking into the efforts at the sub-regional level to coordinate initially very disjointed reactions from the countries, we did look at the ES as one of the probably the best practices in the region. because of the platform you've provided and the meetings, including at the ministerial level, that you have convened. So it's excellent to have you here now, sharing the experience and telling us how you're going to move forward from that. And I'm sure we'll come back to this slightly later. Well, we've heard from Eurasian Economic Commission and very active work and great ambition for the future. And our next speaker will be from Eurasian Development Bank, Mr. Leonid Efimov, who is the head of International Cooperation Division. And I would like very much to hear Leonid's initial thoughts and reaction on the major highlights of the current situation and how did that affect the priority of the bank and generally the perspective on the transport connectivity and global supply chains and the current event from the point of view of Eurasian Development Bank. So Leonid, I hope you're ready. Please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Добрый день еще раз.
Once again, distinguished participants of the forum, I'm going to speak Russian because the official language of Eurasian Development Bank is Russian. First of all, I would like to thank for being invited in this forum. We took part in the previous forums of the sub-regional office for North and Central Asia, and out of 6 countries, members of the bank, 5 are just based in this region. I would like to address response measures of the Eurasian Bank to the pandemic crisis and our measures that were taken prior to the pandemic and during the pandemic. Today, we have anti-crisis program developed in the bank, which is considered by the member countries and will be adopted by the Council. Strategic measure is to provide financial assistance to enterprises which suffered in order to develop integration and cooperation between the member countries, as well as to provide active support to the governmental participants to overcome consequences of the pandemic, thus strengthening the status of the leading institutional development. In order to overcome social and economic consequences of the pandemic, it is required to use all possible support instruments at all levels. And we were focused on 3 blocks. The first one is supporting of the existing lenders, borrowers. For our corporate borrowers, the bank provided a set of measures, in particular customers from Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, those who suffered from the pandemic. So they include credit cost reduction and providing mild period for repayment, restructuring of payments, non-imposing of fines, and facilitating streamlining procedures for credit lines. So the measures cover approximately 800 million US. During the acute period, so we were just assessing the application about approximately for 1 billion US, so which is 1/4 of the bank portfolio. The second block is supporting investment activities in order to ensure sustainability of country members. Member countries. So this will just support the national economies. We did not lose time during the quarantine. We just did it all in time, in a short period of time. As our major focus is on infrastructure development and strengthening economic links between the countries, the bank will take into consideration a set of measures applied by the governments to ensure sustainable development of the national economies. As in this regard, the bank thinks it important to just concentrate or to focus on investment of projects which have integration potential, which are aimed at supporting sustainable economic development of member countries, which have just social effects, which first of all create jobs, new jobs, and which are aimed at new information technologies. One of the consequences of the coronavirus pandemic was very fast acceleration of digitalization globally, including our countries. In this regard, the bank is considering possibility of financing, including the Foundation for Digitalization, which was established in June of the current year. The projects that are aimed at promoting digitalization, markets of products, goods and services, integration processes, management, development of digital infrastructure, and ensuring security of digital processes. In addition to support high priority projects, we will use our technical assistance fund in order to for the internal mechanism of subsidizing interest rates. In addition, take into consideration priorities of the healthcare system development in these conditions. The bank can just open targeted credit facilities for construction and modernization, refurbishment of medical institutions and centers. So approximately, credits for 600 million US were provided since the end of the year, allocated since the. And third one is just supporting entrepreneurship entities. The program comprises, we have 5 programs actually within the bank, and we have an ongoing work to finance second or commercial banks to provide credits to small and medium business, which suffered from the pandemic, and trade financing. In Armenia and Kyrgyzstan, targeted anti-crisis programs of partner banks are being addressed. As soon as we get requests, we are going to provide targeted assistance to the entities which suffered from the pandemic. In addition, the bank has a targeted sub-program to provide mild trade financing. In addition, the bank is the manager of the Development and Stabilization Fund. And the decision was made by the Council of the Fund to provide to Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan, for Kyrgyzstan 100 million US at 1% interest rate for 20 years, and 50 million US to Tajikistan to finance government budget deficit and trade balance deficit. I'm just completing my presentation. In addition, the participants are expecting for the grants to be allocated from the Stabilization Development Fund, which was internally created for healthcare systems in order to expand the possibilities of a fast response to COVID-19 outbreak. Summarizing, I would like to say that Eurasian Bank is providing both short-term measures just to overcome acute measures, and finances development project with a focus on integration nature, which would be extremely important to strengthen economic basis in the aftermath of the pandemic. So we can find information about the activities of the bank at the webpage of the bank. So it's provided both in English and Russian, and abundant information. And we just placed there our analytical reports and reviews issued jointly with the agencies, with UN agencies. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to take them. Thank you. Thank you very much.
it's good for us to hear that there are financial resources available and dedicated to dealing with the pandemic, and you've painted a very broad picture of all the measures and sectors that need to be supported. And I think it's very, it will of course have an impact on trade and transport. And we are very pleased to hear that we can count for the support of Eurasian Development Bank. Let us go to another financial institution who is working more and more in the region of North and Central Asia. We have with us our colleague Sela Hirsch. She's a strategy and policy officer from the Strategy, Policy and Budget Department of Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB. I'm sure this is an acronym that is more and more familiar to the colleagues present here. And Sela, same question to you. What is the thinking? What are the strategic thoughts and priorities in the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, given the current situation? Over to you, Sela.
Thank you, Azar. Good afternoon to fellow panelists and to those who have joined us today. Thank you to ASCAP for inviting the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to join the panel. We're new to this forum, so we very much appreciate the opportunity to get to know the partners around here and also to introduce ourselves. The topic of today's session on strengthening supply chains and connectivity through regional partnerships is very close to our institutional mandate. So for those of us who haven't met us before, we're a relatively young MDB. We were founded only 5 years ago, but with the purpose of fostering sustainable economic development, create wealth, and improve infrastructure connectivity in Asia by investing in infrastructure in other productive sectors. And we aim to do so in cooperation with our MDB peers, as well as with other bilateral institutions. So in terms of our work in the region to date, to provide you with some context, we have 102 members around the globe, including most of the economies here in the North and Central Asia region. As of this month, we have 14 projects in NCA member economies, accounting for roughly USD 3 billion of approved loans and investments. Now, this is significant given our relative youth. We've only been around for 5 years. We have a financing portfolio currently approved of about $20 billion. So that means our projects in the NCA region account for roughly 15%. So that's pretty significant. Now, the speakers before me have covered very well the challenges in trade and integration, as well as the impacts you have observed in the region. So I think I'll take a different approach and focus my intervention on how AIIB's financings in transport and connectivity in terms of changing demand from our members and clients have been influenced by the pandemic. So prior to COVID-19, our projects in the North and Central Asia region were particularly primarily in the transport and energy sectors, and notably in road improvement projects. Since COVID-19, the most significant new financing demand we've received from your countries, as well as other ones in our region, have in fact been in emergency response and budgetary support, not unlike what the earlier panelists had mentioned. So what are these requests? They include requests to extend emergency liquidity support to key strategic sectors, including transportation, but also industry and private sector. So to give you examples of requests from transport companies that have been different than what we were getting before is suddenly we were seeing, for example, logistics companies who saw their revenues decline and needed to inject working capital, or railway companies that saw their passenger revenues go down as people stopped taking public transportation or transportation in general, and wanted to convert passenger trains into freight transport in order to even out their balance sheet. So what this effectively highlighted to us at the AIIB is that the post-COVID trade and integration world saw a different kind of demand from clients, which saw the need for parallel financing in both hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, in addition to emergency working capital that was suddenly needed to keep business surviving during and past the pandemic. So I wanted to highlight just 3 key points before I close off. One is on the role of infrastructure investments, and particularly in the potential of green infrastructure investments to support members in a sustainable economic recovery after COVID. Now, needless to say, infrastructure spending creates jobs and support future growth, something that many countries around the world are already looking at as they transition out of COVID. So we see a lot of opportunities for governments to focus their post-COVID infrastructure spending along a greener development pathway. So this would be to ensure that new transport connectivity infrastructure projects are energy efficient, climate resilient, that they accommodate and integrate the latest technologies, and as such are resilient to other types of emergencies and disasters. This pandemic will probably not be the last one to encounter, and certainly climate change will also continue to test the quality of our infrastructure for years to come. So we have an imperative to prepare for this sooner or later. Second is the role of MDBs and other financiers in ensuring that investments continue in infrastructure and infrastructure maintenance despite the disruptions that we see as a result of COVID. I mentioned that we saw a spike in demand for budgetary support and emergency financing in the wake of COVID. The AIIB has responded very quickly to this need by making $13 billion available in emergency financing to our members. We also recognize that government spending during this COVID period that would have normally gone to infrastructure connectivity projects have sometimes been diverted to address emergency short-term health facility needs, pandemic needs. Yet, as members continue on the path to recovery and growth, the infrastructure needs will still be there. So we need to make sure as MDB and as financier that we continue to make financing available to support regular infrastructure investments that will outlast the pandemic. Third but not least, the pandemic has revealed a serious digital divide within and across member economies. What we have observed is that not all of our counterparts are sufficiently well connected to continue with business as usual in a time like this. So what we saw in our operations along the project cycle is that at the upstream level, some of the project funding for infrastructure connectivity projects have been diverted for health needs. There were delays as a result of the border control issues, supply disruptions mentioned by other panelists earlier, but also some very basic challenges relating to internet connections. We really had some trouble interacting with some of our counterparts to keep a project moving and so on. And so what the pandemic has highlighted for us is that at the same time as investing in the, let's say, business as normal infrastructure projects, we also need to pay more attention to how we're supporting and financing member countries in their digital connectivity in tandem with their physical infrastructure. And this is an area that we can work together in. I will conclude here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you very much. That was very enlightening for us, and as you mentioned yourself, a great opportunity to speak with the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and see opportunities for further partnerships. And you've highlighted, I think, the key lessons, and I cannot support you more in your analysis. And in particular, I would say of course, the digital divide and divide in connectivity that we see across the region, it's always the most vulnerable that are more affected. And all the fragility we've seen in the transport sector, as you said, and the emergency response that this sector that's usually self-reliant has needed during the pandemic. I am very hopeful that joint efforts will help us to change the face of connectivity, as you said, making it more sustainable, make it green. Crisis is an opportunity, as we always say. And there, I hope ESCAP in the future will strengthen the cooperation with Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank and across, of course, all the organizations present here. So thank you for sharing your thoughts and showing us a bit what the reaction of the countries has been so far. That was extremely useful for us.
Can you hear the interpreter? 111, can you wait?
So from Shelley, we will now move to a completely different perspective, but just a very complementary perspective. Let us see, we have a representative of the private sector joining this panel, and the private sector has been, of course, at the forefront of the pandemic, at the forefront of the response to the pandemic. And we have with us Mr. David Morris, who is the Vice Chair of Executive Council of the ESCAP Sustainable Business Network. He has been working with the UN for many, many years, but professionally, he's a director of David Morris Projects, Ltd. And I'm sure, David, from the business perspective, you surely have things to share with us, reacting to what you've heard so far, and of course, in reaching out perspective. So, David, over to you.
Well, thank you, Ajar, and good day to everybody. It's been a very interesting discussion so far. Risk has become central to businesses and, of course, to policymakers this year, more than it has been for a long time. And there are always risks, of course, in business, but there are these new risks from global health emergencies, from geopolitical competition, and of course, in many ways, the crisis that we're experiencing is a dress rehearsal for the climate risks that we know are to come. And so it really is an opportunity for us to rethink how we approach these risks along supply chains, how we look at the rules that govern how we operate and the relationships that we have through our global and regional supply chains, and that we build resilience and robustness. But the first point really is that international cooperation, the structure behind our ability to do business is in crisis this year, and this is a very serious situation for business, and has led to a serious crisis in the economy as much as it has a health crisis. And this is something that is compounding the geopolitical competition that was already increasing but has become extreme this year. And so we're seeing the pressures to change, to alter supply chains coming from all different directions, from very practical reasons in addressing immediate risks through to long-term geopolitical plans to recast supply chains and infrastructure and connectivity over the longer term, which brings both risks and opportunities, and there are good and bad that can come from that. At the same time, multilateralism and the international rules that we operate under is impacted by these crises, and in a sense, multilateralism is in its weakest at the moment, and we've seen that the reaction to COVID and to the compounding and confluence of crises that are all happening at the same time, that actually everybody has turned to national governments. National governments having the ability to immediately respond and to apply resources immediately, and so this is an interesting but a very complex set of problems that we have, and for us moving forward, I think the second point to make is, after making the point that we're in crisis, which we all know, but it's the complexity of that crisis. It's not just coming from one direction, and the second point is that we actually need international cooperation more than ever to find our way out of this. And so we've just heard from multilateral development banks, not only do we need the kinds of multilateral cooperation that the big development banks can bring, which is critical, but we also, because we need to deal with the financing for development more than ever, and this is a long-term problem, but also we have the more immediate problems of debt, of restarting trade and investment, and making sure that there is a supply of finance. Just as governments are ensuring that populations are protected, we also need to ensure that businesses are protected and are able to restart economies and keep the global trade and investment continuing. And actually, Victor Fung made a very interesting point at a regional conversation series that ESCAP hosted earlier this week, that there's a real problem with trade finance at the moment, and with export insurance finance, and that this is something that policymakers could actually move on fairly quickly to help free up cash flow there, and the ability to enter into the risks that are faced in export at the moment. And of course, beyond that, in the longer term, we need to look at our trade agreements and our investment agreements and ensure that they are fit for purpose and that they are going to stimulate growth rather than restrict it. And while at the moment the pressures, the political pressures, are to hunker down, to put all the wagons in a circle and to just think about ourselves and our own nation first. And of course, that's not the lessons of history. It's not learning the lessons of the past. It's repeating the mistakes of the past. But in the more recent past, we of course have learnt that it's open regionalism and open trade and investment and rules-based cooperation that actually works and that will stimulate growth. And we've certainly, the strongest examples of that have been in the fastest growing economies of East Asia, and those lessons we can learn across all of Asia, all of the Asia Pacific. Which brings us then to the question about infrastructure and connectivity, and we've heard some comments about the importance of digitalisation and the opportunities there, which I think the crisis has underlined, and there are huge differences in capabilities to digitalise, but we also heard from Mia at the very beginning about the good work that ESCAP has been doing, looking at helping to digitise customs processes, and there's a lot of useful information about that on the ESCAP website. There's a need to, with the whole question of the digital economy, there's a need for us to look very carefully at the governance of the digital economy, because it's not well governed, and it's been an area of where really the international community has been very slow to develop agreed rules, and that will be very important as we move forward. Two more points, and really a very important one that I've already referred to is that we all know there are climate risks coming at us in the future, and these are so serious that we need to be planning for those now as we recover. So as we move through and out of, hopefully, the COVID emergency, we need to be building into all of our planning sustainability, sustainable steps as we move forward, and putting the sustainable development goals at the centre of what we do. And we've seen that in the multilateral development banks, for example. We've seen them moving in that direction, which is a very good thing. At the national level, as I say, we really need policymakers to resist the very popular pressures for protectionism, and to resist that, and to actually to look for opportunities to work together. And we need to address some of the big forward challenges. So finally, my final point would be just to encapsulate all of that really we need to learn lessons of recent decades about working together, building rules that work for everybody, and in fact, as the theme of this session tells us, we really need multi-stakeholder cooperation between governments, between businesses, and even with civil society as well, because all of these issues we're addressing at the moment are extremely serious, and we've all been talking about these issues of supply chains and globalization for a long time, but this year a crisis has hit, and it really does bring it home to us how we've got to be more resilient, more sustainable, and more cooperative if we're to resolve these problems in the future. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Yes, thank you, David. I think you raised the stakes, and we, particularly from UNESCO perspective, and based on the work we've been doing so far, as you said, the cooperation is tremendously important now, but it's also the most difficult now. The elements, just as the basic of transparency and communicating and getting up-to-date, reliable information of the restrictions and the measures. That was very hard to come by at the beginning. That what created a lot of trade costs and uncertainties. And of course, we are unpacking it now, but everything was questioned. And I think the points you've made show that very, very strongly. And it was great to have this global, almost such a long-term take on this. And from this, let us move to another perspective from the business point of view, because we have with us a representative of a particular subset of private sector, the Freight Forwarders Association. We have with us Ms. Yelena Vasilevskaya, who is the Deputy Director for Project Management and Training of Kazakhstan's Freight Forwarders Association. So they were really people caught up in the forefront, in the heat of the moment, dealing with the pandemic and the responses to that. So Yelena, you are, I believe, the last speaker of the session, but by far not the least. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. Please go ahead, the floor is yours.
Большое спасибо за то, что пригласили.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this important forum. Specifically, I was interested in this session for the chain. We should not forget that the majority of our countries are landlocked, and therefore shipment of cargoes are just carried out by railroads and automobile roads. And if railroads were still working according to their rules, and some national companies provided some mild mode for transportation, specifically for in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, Russia, but the countries where railroad network is not sufficiently developed, they just faced big problems, specifically in, we can say that in food security, because the majority, all countries, the first stage of the pandemic took measures for just closing their countries for non-dissemination of virus, and so still we just face a lot of problems with the automobile points, crossing points, border crossing points, because people should be just healthy. All the drivers have just to pass PCR, and so that's deteriorated the situation with automobile shipments. And all the speakers before me just mentioned that under the auspice of UNESCAP and other organizations, dialogues are being arranged, and most likely the top managers are just taking part in this, like those in charge of legal framework. But regrettably, this information is not always being communicated to private sector. Quite recently, I carried out research on the measures taken by the Central Asian countries in response to the pandemic. And even if there is a clear-cut goal, it's extremely difficult to find information in open source, in public sources. So it's non-systemic, it's presented in a non-systemic way. Well, I'm talking as a representative of private logistical sector. And in many countries, it is published only in the national languages. So that means that, this transport highways or just arteries are just blind, if you can say so. And of course, private sectors try to find ways out. In the majority of countries, some local chats were supported on WhatsApp, or we, for example, use WhatsApp chats where representatives of private sector share information, who carries what cargo, what difficulties they can face there, and so on and so forth. Of course, this is a good development, and thanks to the private sector that even in this difficult situation, they are managing to find some way out. But it would be good just to have it as a sort of, to have it underpinned by the so-called civilized basis. So back in the end of July, sorry. So that question was considered, and it would be good if UNESCAP and other organizations could join it and create some client-oriented or hands service where private entrepreneurships could find such information. Moreover, such in addition to the fact that these rules are new, they are just updated and amended very often and very fast. And at the meeting, so all those issues were voiced up, but we hope that some solution will be found. As far as some opportunities are concerned that were found by private sectors, for example, we as association did not carry out any analytical work, but each organization tries to find its own solution. What is positive? A positive result is that the countries with a good level of digitalization have better chances to get adapted to the changing conditions. In particular, I would just highlight that Azerbaijan is well developed in terms of e-services, and Kazakhstan. In Kazakhstan, for transport sector, two services were implemented quite in a short period of time, in addition to one-stop window. So, for example, application for entering the other countries, so was facilitated, even if such small step is made, so that would make our life easier. But all these issues that are just recommended in terms of transportation documents should be applied by the countries, and transport business is waiting for this or looking forward to just have it applied, because if each step on paper makes all the arrangements longer and deteriorate our opportunities. That's all that I wanted to say. Of course, I just would wish everyone to get out of the situation, not only with minimum losses, but will just back better. So meaning that we'll have some impetus for development. We should not forget that trade is not possible without transport, but transport without trade, it's not possible as well. Well, that's all from my part. Thank you.
I think that was really a reality check and the view from the ground. And the share, again, it rejoins the point that David made of how much the lack of information, transparency, and just access to reliable information has really hit the business sector. And as you mentioned, I really appreciate your remark. UNESCAP has done what we can in terms of trying to get the access to the information. Mia has mentioned in her presentation the tracking and tracing work by UNESCAP, where we sort of gave a very high level overview of what is happening in the countries. But I would strongly support your assessment that it was hard for us to see what is happening. We got a general picture, but business cannot take business decisions based on a hunch or general picture. You need intelligence, you need information, and that really hit you hard during the pandemic. So I do hope, as you said, that the use of UN instruments and regional agreements on trade and transport connectivity will be strengthened because of the pandemic, because that's where we see the usefulness of such initiatives, the UN standards on trade facilitation, single window, digitalization of transport, smart transport solutions. The recipes are there. We need to get cooking. So thank you, Elena. Thank you for your intervention. And I think with that, we'll close the first round of, we have a special speaker online for this session from the Economic Cooperation Organization that I know all of you know, and for our region, North and Central Asia, they're certainly the key actors. And unfortunately, for technical reasons, they couldn't join CUDA from their offices in Tehran, but thanks to a very committed support from UNESCOP Regional Office in Almaty and Natalia. I think we have them online, and I would like to give them opportunity to highlight the most recent work that ECHO has been doing on promoting transport connectivity despite or because of the challenges that we've seen with the COVID-19. So Natalia, if you have a colleague from ECHO Secretariat online, I believe it's Miss Bayan Adilbekova from the Economic Cooperation Organization Secretariat, who has a few lessons and highlights to share with us from the work in ECHO. So do we have her online?
Yes, go.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. I would like to answer this question regarding activities that we have been doing in the ECO in regard to facilitation of cross-border transit transport, with the emphasis on of softening the containment measures in the ECO countries. We have actually succeeded in test launching the ECO truck container trains. Just the recent month, in 26th of July, we have launched a series of container trains on the Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, Iran. We call it KTAI road corridor, and they have reached the borders of Afghanistan, and through Afghanistan they went all over through the Tajikistan territory to the destination point in Osh city of Kyrgyzstan. This test run was over 11,000 kilometers, which was realized in a few days' time. And given the circumstances of the COVID, where the containment measures are still pose serious constraints to countries, but nevertheless, owing to the regional partnership and cooperation with the International Road Union, who is our permanent and sustainable partner, we have managed to finalize this test on 14th of August. And right after that, on 23rd August, we have launched another test run of container trains on the KTAI road, and this time it was from Iran to Afghanistan and to Uzbekistan, which took 2 days to reach the border. In fact, we would like to share this message that even under the COVID circumstances, it is possible to test the international cooperation with good practices, practice-based and practice-oriented experiences, such as these 2 tests which have taken place in recent months. And in addition, I would say that last year in November, we have tested the run of the container trains starting from the seaports in the ECO region, in particularly from the Bandar Abbas port. And now we announced that the KTAI road is operational. It can service and handle container trucks. The measures of facilitating the road-based transit have been tested, and we will be learning lessons from the test, and we will summarize those. We have actually summarized the first post-test run reviews from the enrolled member countries, and we have issued the report. And if one of you is interested, we are willing to share those reports with you. And this is also the result of the joint ECO-IRU study on the KTI road, which finalized last year in November through the fourth high-level expert group meeting, which took place in Tehran, and where the plan of action was adopted. And following this plan of action, we have now successfully finalized these two test runs, of which I have familiarized you with. And if some of you are interested in more details about these test runs, you can look through the presentation which we have prepared for this session. But owing to the reason that we were not able to connect to the system, to the Kudo system, I'm just briefing you about the last developments in the ECO. And in addition, we have circulated to our member states the guidelines where we have put the emphasis on the implementation of Article 28 of the ECO Transit Transport Framework Agreement, which calls for to allowing the unhindered passage for road tracks, both loaded and unloaded. We also put the emphasis for to mitigate the impact of containment measures and restrictions, especially on asymptomatic persons who do not carry the evidences of the COVID disease. Also, we introduced the designated spots within the areas of border crossing points, which were for specific use by the ECO truck containers under the flagship of the en-route member states. And this measure is very useful because it designates special parking lots for our trucks where they can receive the adequate services and treatment, including the medical checkups and sanitation and other means of containment of the COVID disease. And plus, we have announced the special stop points. These are the specially designated areas for the trucks to refuel, and where the drivers could make their payments of road fees, and they could be provided compulsory civil liability insurance policies on the part of the owner of a motor vehicle, and other services which are specific for road. And in these specially designated stop points, our vehicles can be stopped except for any other reasons. And this was a very useful measurement that we have instituted on our ECO transit transport railway routes. But as for the railway,
Dear Bayan, I think we're running out of time, unfortunately. I think you've covered and you answered the question brilliantly, because you've highlighted a major breakthrough in transport connectivity through the good auspices of ECO in cooperation with RU on the KTAI corridor. And colleagues, those of you who are listening to us, please bear in mind and be informed that we have a very long technical presentation by ECO Secretariat available to us. We will make it available on the website so you can get the details of this work. So we do not have much time at this point for further perhaps in-depth discussions, but I've been receiving a lot of questions from the floor of our session. We have very short amount of time, but it's still possible. I have a question from the floor to Shelley from AIIB and Mr. Eftimov, but perhaps Shelley can go first because it was primarily to her. And if you could share your quick reaction of how, because of COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerability of global finance, because of lack of consideration of some social and environmental aspects in our financing, what is AIIB doing, or other development banks doing differently to make sure that global finance and investment is taken into account the social and economic consideration, helping us prevent the crisis similar to COVID-19? Shelley, very briefly, we're pressed for time, but I'm sure you can maybe share a quick thought on this.
Yeah. Thank you very much for this question. And you're absolutely right that COVID has exposed some of the vulnerabilities in the financing sector. So one of the core principles of financings in AIIB is that we consider every single project on financial and economical sustainability. So it has to make sense for us to invest in it. That said, we're also a development bank. So we have a mandate and an imperative to help out countries that are in trouble right now. And so what we have been doing together with the other MDBs is that under ongoing engagements with the IMF and peer MDBs, we are very much engaged in conversations about each country's debt sustainability. And so one of the roles that we play as a fellow financial institution is that by contributing our share of the financing, we help diversify the risks of lending to some borrowers. And we also diversify the capital resources that can be raised by these borrowers. So I'll finish here on account of time. But I'm happy to answer questions by email as well. I'll put my email in the message list. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shelley. I think that was, it's what we need is the proof of intention, and the details, of course, will follow. May Mr. Efimov, maybe you would like to also just briefly share with us what's your bank's experience in addressing these challenges for global finance, and how does your bank make sure that future projects support nature-based solutions? And if there are any specific projects you would like to highlight, you can take the floor. So, Mr. Efimov, please go ahead.
Большое спасибо. Я не думаю, что я...
Thank you. I don't think I will mention some specific project right now. Currently in the pipeline, we have 87 projects, and the total portfolio is $4.4 billion US. That is why when we're talking about banks projects, you may just review them through our website. I also would like to underscore one specific point, that in order to apply anti-crisis measures, the bank foresees stress testing for our projects, including the sensitivity to the impact of such things like prices, fluctuations for the commodities, devaluation of the national currency, inflation, receiving capacity to pay off debts, and other criteria of financial sustainability for the projects. The specific attention will be given to whether the borrower could pay off the debt and service the debt, and whether the borrowers could participate with their own equities in the project. And based on the stress testing, we also reveal demands, borrower demands, and then we tailor individual measures for specific project supports in order to minimize banks' risks. And what kind of measures specifically I'm talking about, I dwelled before in my previous presentation.
Has covered this, but it was great to hear this highlight. I have a question, and colleagues, because of limitation of time, I'll have to pick and choose, but honestly, we've received quite a few excellent questions, and one I would like to pick out because it's very interesting, and anyone can answer this, but I will perhaps call first on our colleagues from Eurasian Economic Commission, but anyone else can jump in, maybe David Morris, because they're talking about digitalization. We are, of course, supporting and we've seen a lot of digital solution being piloted, but there is a question of what are the danger of too fast of a turn for national governments, basically, what are the dangers of quick digitalization in this particular sub-region, or generally, or maybe for some types of businesses? I would like to see if anyone of the panelists would like to take the floor, but maybe I can direct this question to David. David Morris, based on your experience and your ties with the business community, can you share any downsides or dangers of quick digitalization?
The area of digitalization is an area of great opportunity if we can get it right. But there are some big risks, actually, and they've become very topical risks across the world during this crisis. And you know, there's a very interesting example of cyber security risks, which is perhaps on a little bit of a tangent, but it's quite relevant here, because the kinds of risks that are concerning governments and businesses in cybersecurity really are the result of a failure of policymakers to keep up with the rapid pace of technological development. So we really don't have the robust rules or systems in place to manage digitalization as we should. And so this is not anyone's fault. This is just the nature of the speed of technological innovation. But the fact that we have these theoretical and sometimes quite real cyber risks that have been identified throughout communications technology and in other areas is actually a serious problem, and one that we really need to put our minds towards. How do we build robust risk management frameworks? Because we'll never be able to be 100% sure, but we will need to build the capabilities to manage risks in the digital economy, where there will always be cyber risks. And so that would be my slightly tangential, but I think it's quite an interesting example of the kinds of challenges we're facing, and that could get much more serious in future.
Oh, thank you, David. I think that was spot on, at least as far as transport connectivity is concerned. I'm reminded of one of large industry surveys that were done prior to COVID-19 in 2019. And it was done for the shipping industry, and we were asking them what are the major issues for the shipping industry globally, and cybersecurity was one of the tops, if not the top. I think you did highlight a very, very specific concern with digital security, and of course we cannot guarantee cybersecurity the same levels for everyone, and again the most vulnerable might be the more exposed. So thank you, David, for offering this. We only have less than 10 minutes before wrapping up, but there is a very interesting, again, a comment, and I use this opportunity to really thank people who have joined us, not through just the Kudo platform for the speakers and participants, but through YouTube, for really fantastic questions pushing in the boundaries of this discussion. There is one general reflection addressed perhaps to everyone. So how this current environment, how these measures may lead the change from linear economy to a circular economy. How does this apply to supply value chains and connectivity in North and Central Asia? Are there any key opportunities for the region to tap into? So perhaps, I know anyone can again discuss this, but we have with us Mia, who has started this discussion, and she spoke about the reshaping reshaping of the regional global supply chain. So Mia, if you are able to join us and give us your thoughts on this idea of, again, going to a circular economy and the implication for value change.
Sorry, there is a quite a delay in connecting. Excellent discussions. I think I wish we could stay for another 2 hours to listen to everyone. But more specifically on the circular one, I think it will help us really understand better the value of services in the formulation of the value chains, right? Because we will have to pay much more attention to what to do after the consumption, etc. So it's very important topic. I think ESCAP is working with the Environment Division and with other partners on that, and I'm happy also to say that that through the trade policy formulation in terms of sustainable development, we are taking a part of that as well. So what do we do with that? It is really placing proper price on different parts of the value chains, right? And pricing the things properly, pricing the internalization of costs and risks. And then I think these components will fit much better into the place and will give a proper reward to the investors or to those that have to actually be incentivized to invest in the circular economy activities. So this is what was lacking so far. I think it was hinted by many of the presentations that the policymakers have to make a proper a set of incentives, not subsidizing just to meet the vested interest, but actually subsidizing with the long-term view of sustainable development. And in that case, we will get a better reaction in terms of placing the new investments in these activities that will lead to the circular economy.
Okay, Mia. Thank you very much, loud and clear. And as you said, excellent discussion so far. We have 5 minutes left. Actually, we are 5 minutes past the time, but well, our colleagues from logistics side gave us an extra few minutes because of how interesting the discussion is. I would like to see if there are any requests from the floor. I think Mr. Efimov, Leonid, would like to make an intervention. Please go ahead.
Да, я хотел бы буквально одну.
Just to take 1 or 2 minutes to pay your attention on the cooperation of development banks with UN agencies and organizations. We see this cooperation as just mutual complementary. We are an investment bank. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we just sent letters to UNIDA, to FAO, to UNEP, to UNESCO, to UNEC. And for example, with UNIDA, as far as UNIDA, how we view these complementary activities. According to their programs and mandate, UNIDA is considering all applications on preparing feasibility studies and projects. We are an investment bank. We just suggest that UNIDA just shares these proposals and these draft projects with us. And if they meet our strategy, then we can prepare feasibility, so they can prepare feasibility study, thus having consultancy from the side of our managers, so that after that we could invest into such projects. Another example of such bilateral complementary work lies in analytical work. In particular, jointly with FAO, we are preparing now terms of reference for joint analytical work to define most critical sub-sectors in agriculture in Central Asian countries where investments are needed mostly. And after that, to develop jointly with FAO they have really a very great experience in preparing feasibility studies for the project, for our further investments. In such mutual complementation, we can just, complementing of our work, we can just help our member countries. Thank you.
To hear you speak about such a concrete and complementarity, and it has proven to work across the decades, and I think that's an opportunity for us to forge this complementarity even more. You can surely count on UNESCO in terms of supporting the analytical work, but also the project selection and design efforts in the country. So thank you for bringing this up. And
И еще одно слово. Я
Sure.
думаю,
I think that we can actively work with UNESCO in terms of digitalization, so that digital initiatives fund would be created in the bank. And we could develop jointly projects with UNESCO in this regard, in this area.
We were looking for concrete ideas, and you've just given us one, so that will be a follow-up to this discussion. I think it's a borderline in terms of time management, but I think the only speaker who I would like to hear from, maybe a couple of minutes, is from Mr. Pantelei from the Eurasian Economic Commission. If you can, Andrei, tell us just maybe one or two ideas along the same line, how the partnership between UN system and the Eurasian Economic Commission can be strengthened. Maybe a couple of ideas. Whatever you can share, you have 1 minute. Please go ahead.
Да, спасибо, Ажар.
Thank you, Ajar. Indeed, well, such events that was today's forum is one of the unique format where international organizations, governments, businesses, and academia can meet. Therefore, Eurasian Economic Commission encourages this kind of initiatives. And I think that this year, next year, we are going to arrange this kind of platforms where we will be able to gather stakeholders who are interested both on the level of the country, on the national level, on the regional level, to jointly discuss national and regional issues and challenges which will be implementable and helpful for business. This is probably a potential initiative.
You sort of almost made the final remarks. I think this is a unique platform, and UNESCO, it's a pleasure and an honor to support this kind of discussion. I think we are incarnation of Sustainable Goal number 17. I don't have time for any wrapping up or substantive discussions, and I don't think I will do it justice to it if I try. So I would like to conclude and give the floor back to Natalia, just with the general rounds of virtual uploads for all the colleagues who have been preparing this meeting and sharing the ideas. It was a pleasure to be a moderator, and I certainly learned a lot during the discussion. So I'm looking forward to the next opportunity to speak with you in this or different format. So Natalia, Ajar is signing off. I'm giving the floor to you for housekeeping details. Thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Ajar. What an excellent, strong last session. Everybody, please stay on. Do not link out of this link, because we will now go over to the closing session. The closing session will start in about 3 minutes, so you have time for a very quick break, but then please come back to your screens, and we will move to the closing of the forum. The highlight here is that we will summarize some of the main points from every session, and we will also hear from some of the key participants, co-organizers, stakeholders, what kind of messages we would like to take forward out of this forum to our countries and to other processes globally. So please stay connected, and we will start with the opening in exactly 2 minutes. Okay. ladies and gentlemen. This indeed has been a very intense 3 days of discussions, and we're now coming to our closing session. We will keep the closing session short, but we really would like to give a voice to a lot of people who have participated in this forum to really collectively shape some of the main messages that we want to take forward. And therefore, I would now like to give the floor to Mr. Nikolai Pomoshnikov, officer in charge of the sub-regional office in North and Central Asia in ESCAP, who will moderate this last closing session. Over to you, Nikolai.
Thank you very much, Natalia. It's a great pleasure for me to continue our last session for closing. We have already passed and conducted 6 sessions, very interesting and lively discussion, practically embraced all important issues which our member states facing with regard to implementation of SDGs and Agenda 2030. So I would like to share with all distinguished participants the most important messages from each session which the participants raised and brought attention for implementation of SDGs. Regarding the opening session, the major messages the following: every crisis entails opportunity. Platforms such as this forum useful to exchange learnings and solutions as countries respond to the pandemic for all parts and sectors of the society, business, education, trade, or adoption of digital technology. Shifts in attitudes and awareness. People are more aware of importance of good governance and of basic services provision. Some are now more climate aware. Important to note contributions citizens are making, especially youth who are experiencing formative time in education or their early careers during the pandemic. As countries seek to reopen, the SDGs offer a chance to build towards better, including a renewed focus on economic diversification and reduced dependence on fossil fuels, widened social safety nets, digital investment, more resilient and diverse supply chains, and strengthen regional connectivity, better monetary and financial coordination, and regional cooperation on climate change. NCA also needs to focus on the missing middle, people that are newly or increasingly vulnerable because of the COVID-19 crisis, and for whom there were insufficient support measures, like those who were non-poor informal workers, long-term unemployed, labor migrants, and seasonal workers, occasional gig workers, and so on. Session 1, technological transformation and sped up digitalization due to COVID-19. Challenges to be overcome. Access to broadband internet and digital devices, the digital divide which has age, gender, and rural urban dimensions. Challenges and opportunities for women and girls from building more gender inclusive and safe cities to targeted support for female entrepreneurs. Make cities people-centered, green, and innovative. from affordable housing to using waterways for active living, green rooftops, or digitalization and technological innovation in infrastructure and services. Cities need to support well-being and provide opportunities for all. Importance for whole of society approach out of crisis and in achieving sustainable development. In particular, improving enabling environment for volunteering and supporting initiative by youth. Crucially, youth don't just want to be participating symbolically. They want to be included in actual decision making. Session 2 on sub-regional and national progress reporting on SDGs in context of the COVID-19 crisis. COVID-19 pandemic has had a detrimental effect on already off-track SDGs. But SDGs are the best tool to address interlink and multidimensional vulnerabilities to lead out of crisis and transformation towards inclusive, resilient, and sustainable economies and societies. More effort needed to produce timely, accurate, and disaggregated data. Countries of North and Central Asia are comparatively advanced in collecting data, but large gaps remain which make measuring of SDG progress difficult. VNRs are best products of multi-stakeholder cooperation between national governments, regional organizations, civil society, academia, and the private sector, including innovative use of data through new technologies and from non-state stakeholders. Embed SDGs into national development framework. Important not only focus on VNR's preparation, but institutionalize collaboration to implement the SDGs and measure progress. Integrated and SDG aligned planning, budgeting, implementing, and monitoring and evaluation. Session 3 major messages. The COVID-19 highlighted and intensified pre-existing inequalities, leaving vulnerable groups, including older persons, persons with disabilities, migrants, youth, and women, at risk of being left behind. The pandemic highlighted the interrelation of health with other socioeconomic issues. Multi-sectoral cooperation and a whole of government approach needs to be considered when addressing current vulnerabilities. Social protection is crucial to build resilience. Universal access to health care is crucial for efforts to contain the virus as well as to support infected patients. Social protection has shown to be a tool to build resilience in the pandemic. Increasing access to social protection, including for vulnerable groups, will be crucial when building back better to build further resilience to future crises. Women were disproportionately affected by secondary effects of the pandemic, resulting from the closure of schools, child care facilities, and care for older persons. Women faced the double burden of providing unpaid care and pursuing remunerated work at the same time. The provision of unpaid care work by women increased significantly. Women are also more likely to be vulnerable and informal work, which exposes them to additional vulnerabilities. Key challenges in introducing distance learning in Central Asia are education quality decline, digital divide, and skills gap in ICT of parents, children, and teachers, accesses to learning, and emotional unrest and anxiety. Education is a human right and a precondition for achieving all 17 SDGs, and investing in education needs to be prioritized. The pre-existing digital divide, differences in access to ICT for certain groups, contributed to intensifying inequalities during the pandemic. Session 4, there is a strong correlation between adopting sustainable food systems, SFS, building back better after the COVID-19, and progress acceleration towards 2030 agenda. Therefore, need to focus on sustainable solutions for the healthy supply of food, accounting for interconnectedness and trade-offs, and supporting most vulnerable groups, which are affected by both undernourishment and obesity. Several NCA countries highlight high dependence on food imports, which made them vulnerable to impacts of COVID-19. Related border closures, supply interruptions led to the higher prices and increased the vulnerability of food commodity chains. Investment into agriculture needs to be focused with an emphasis on market-based and value chain approaches as the core of development program to underpin sustainability of agriculture. Agriculture also needs strong infrastructure and policy development to become an integral part of sustainable food systems. Women are disproportionately affected by COVID-19, which has undermined the household's long-term resilience. Women make up to 30% of employees in the agricultural sector, while more than 70% of the successfully managed farms are headed by women. Need for a special support for women by governments, especially with the overwhelming consequences of COVID-19 and lack of IT and digital technology skills, especially among women in rural areas. Session 5. Governments and employees must work together to provide financial relief and expanded social benefits and protections in a time of unprecedented unemployment, so that workers must not choose between access to finances and risking their health. We must not risk losing years of progress on empowering women and improving gender equality, as women are on the front lines of the pandemic with care work and jobs in the informal sector and service industries. They must be trained and equipped to engage in digital work and kept in education despite COVID-19. Government incentives such as fiscal instruments or public-private partnerships are needed to accelerate the transition to a green economy, both by targeting relief and job creations efforts at the environmentally conscious sectors, and by directly supporting businesses involved in the green economy through government procurement and capital markets alike. To assist in employment for young people and women, governments can bolster professional skills development and training, especially in digital technologies, or leverage social work programs and commit to a human-centric recovery opposed to merely seeking to restore GDP growth to pre-pandemic levels. And I just would like also to highlight just recently concluded session 6. While healthcare needs are top priority now, pandemic outlasting investments in digital and physical infrastructure are key to sustainable development and improvement of resilience. In building forward, ecological sustainability is cracks climate risk continue to grow and cannot be downplayed even in times of other crises. Ecologically sustainable investments and practices should be promoted to the highest regard when restarting the economy, locally, nationally, regionally, and globally. Efficient and transparent communication between the public and the private sector is essential to ensure even the most basic economic functioning. A role of multilateral development banks to COVID-19 mitigation and continuing of sustainable and resilient development cannot be downplayed. The pandemic has resulted in a multidimensional crisis of not only health and economy, but also of geopolitical tensions. It is important for politicians to hold virtues of multilateral rules-based cooperation high, avoiding increasing popular pressure for protectionism to not to repeat mistakes of history. So this is the major messages from all 6 sessions, and I now would like to go to the table and to ask our speakers to exchange views. Before going to this, I would like to remind that first of all is necessary to release, to press the button, blue button, release a microphone, and then to press red buttons of microphone and camera to start speaking. So, dear distinguished participants, dear speakers, let's go to the table. As I mentioned, as you know, this format requires a short response only. Kindly keep your answer to maximum of 2 minutes. And I will now call on each of you to respond to this question. From the perspective of your organization and stakeholder group, what are the main messages of this forum that that participants should act on, and what from the sub-regional perspectives of North and Central Asia should we convey to the regional and global follow-up and review processes of the 2030 agenda? And I just would like to check. Yes, so To answer this question, first I would like to request a representative from Georgia, Ms. Natia Tsekaradze, National Coordinator of SDG Administration of the Government of Georgia, to answer the question. The floor is yours, Natia. Please. As I mentioned, it's necessary just to press this release microphone and then two buttons. Oh, nice to see you. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you once again for this conference. Thank you for the organizers for holding this wonderful conference. The Forum on Implementation of Sustainable Development Goals, which was a unique opportunity to share sub-regional perspective on the progress of Sustainable Development Goals. And it's very important that the event brought together stakeholders from government as well as from civil society, international organizations and academia from various countries, and provide them with the opportunity to share experience and key challenges and opportunities for the implementation of the 2030 agenda, and to provide some regional inputs and perspectives on the agenda. This 3 days forum created a space to share policy solutions, best practices and challenges in SDG implementation, and help to identify sub-regional trends. And the event enabled an inclusive and very interesting dialogue among multi-stakeholder groups on the implementation of the agenda, 2030 agenda, and to reflect sub-regional perspective into the relevant global processes. And the forum has awareness and understanding of the key challenges and opportunities through sharing of experience and knowledge, and provide a good practice and partnership for accelerating the progress of SDGs. And it really supported capacity building for countries. These kind of events are very important, especially in the time of COVID-19, as the world is now in the battle with the pandemic. The importance of sustainable development gains new impetus, and 2030 agenda can be achieved only through the effective partnership and inclusive process. And the pandemic presents both an enormous challenges as well as opportunities for reaching the sustainable development goals. And I strongly believe that we must redouble our efforts in order to remain on the path of the positive progress towards the 2030 agenda. And the crisis has shown us how deeply connected we are to
I think we have some technical problem. Yeah, your picture is frozen, or maybe I think we face some problems, technical problems with connection. Так. Okay, colleagues. Yeah, let's move to our next speaker. And next speaker, which I have in my list, Ms. Baketkul Kambar, Director of Economic Research Institution under the Ministry of National Economy of Kazakhstan. Baketkul, the floor is yours. Please. Are you with us, Baketkul? Yes, yeah, she's connecting.
Слышно, да?
Да.
Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues. I congratulate everybody with the completion of the forum. I am not a director of the Institute, so in the Institute we have a Center for Strategic Development and Sustainable Development. I am director of this center, for Sustainable Development, and the chairperson of our Institute is Mr. Ruslan Sultanov. I would say that the Sub-Regional Forum, so this is the first time when I take part in such forum, and it was really interesting for me just to listen to all the presentations. And I would say that the forum showed once again how topical SDGs are, and how all those issues that we are facing today were thoughtfully projected so many long time ago. And I think the forum results will show what risks exist and what should be taken into account, what adjustments should be made in implementation of SDGs in different countries, because the forum showed that the major principle of SDGs is no one left behind. But today, in the pandemic conditions, we can see that this principle is of high importance, but how to implement it? When I was just visiting different sessions, I could understand that in some countries, people do not have no idea how to implement, how to manage these risks, and I think that this forum would allow us to define risks and to draft specific mechanism to manage these risks to efficiently attain all the goals set. Thank you.
Good. Yeah, I think you raised very important issue, which really we need to bring out from this forum, and how to govern all these risks. It's really very important for each country and each stakeholder dealing with SDGs. Thank you very much. Our next speaker in the list is Mr. Anton Tsvetov, Deputy Director of the Department of Multilateral Economic Cooperation and Special Projects, Ministry of Economic Development of the Russian Federation. The floor is yours, Anton, please.
Thank you, Chair. Please allow me to deliver my remarks in Russian. Уважаемый господин модератор, уважаемые участники форума,
Moderator, distinguished participants of the forum. First of all, I would like to thank for this opportunity to discuss these topical issues of attaining 2030 agenda in our region. Based on the results of the sessions of the countries who provided their VNRs for the first time, including Russia, I would say that, of course, the mere experience of preparing such a review is a unique
лучшими практиками. Сам процесс сбора информации на национальном уровне позволяет выделить тенденции и провести
is a good opportunity to analyze the progress of SDGs implementation in every given country. We see that the SDG is a long-term focus, which is especially relevant for developing countries, and pandemic would not change this. I would like to pick up key points of our deliberations. First of all, the background of pandemic, the states has to protect personal health and on the other hand support economy and private sector. At the same time, they have to find trajectory of sustainable long-term growth. The most important focus was given to the formation of sustainable food system based on economic development, social protection, and environmental protection, and all those three components has to be taken into consideration simultaneously. We also have to think about high medical services quality and the accessibility of medical services to rural and remote population. Monitoring of 2030 agenda is important, and for this high quality statistics is required and exchange of this data. Crisis was an impetus for further digitalization as a way for overcoming repercussions of the pandemic, which is very important in this regard to develop infrastructure, boosting digital literacy and bridging digital gap. On my behalf, I also would like to say that acceleration of social and economic development in the region, including remote areas, on the framework of the Russian chairmanship in SCO, we offered our partners to exchange best practices in developing remote areas, and currently in our park we collected more than 130 solutions in this regard. I also would like to admit the importance of regional integration and cooperation as one of the tools of alleviating the consequences of pandemic as a source of synergy for SDGs. Among the forum participants, we had the Eurasian Economic Commission and Eurasian Development Bank, which gave us important information about the SDG growth, SDG implementation in Eurasian Economic Community. We are thinking about investments requirement for sustainability of businesses and finding new niches in foodstuffs, greenhouse, and medical services and others. On one hand, the crisis significantly worsening the perspectives of SDGs implementation, but on the other hand, the crisis enlightens the importance of SDG development and implementation, and in this regard we have to think on how to change the agenda for SDG implementation, make it adjusted for the new environment and reality, and that is to say, I think collective efforts should be focused on further developments of SDGs in our region, and I wish success to all the participants.
Remarks. I agree with the importance of VNR preparation process, and ESCAP contributed a lot, assisting to member states in this regard. We organized last year. We organized twinning exercise when we brought two countries, one already prepared VNR and another just in the process of preparation, and they exchange the best experience and best lessons learned for preparation. It was very useful, And I think we will continue this exercise for future to collect the most important and the best experience from our member states. And your remarks regarding the integration and connectivity, I think very important for strengthening our sub-regional and regional cooperation. Thank you very much. We are really glad that the Ministry of Economy of the Russian Federation takes active part in this forum and contributed to its success. Thank you.
Chair, will you switch on the mic, please?
Please press the release button, and then you need to press microphone on and camera. Yes, please, Manuchetra.
How do you do? Result of our 3 days ESCAP forum, and would like to conclude that our session of countries all prepared and submitted their first VNR reports, and said to highlight following key ideas from our forum. First key idea, it is we have to enhance national monitoring and evaluation system of SDGs implementation based on localization and making available disaggregated data to ensure the principle leaving no one behind. Also, it should be highlighted that countries prepared the first VNR revealed gap and learned important lessons should work on their on filling the gaps, and also to share their experience with all the countries worldwide. To ensure active engagement of civil society, private sector, and international community into SDGs implementation, we through their resource mobilization. Also, in the context of COVID, we have realized even more importance of facilitation of digitalization of all the business processes and services in the countries worldwide to ensure SDGs implementation, focusing on gender inclusiveness. Also, another important remark, it is we have to enhance mutual collaboration with development partners with the focus on to ensure sharing best international experience on SDGs implementation in the context of pandemic, as well as providing comprehensive financial support in this regard. This is my key remarks, and I would like to thank for the opportunity to participate in this event, and would like also to wish success to all participants. Thank you.
Thank you, Manuchetra. I just would like to remind all speakers to observe a time frame of 2 minutes to provide the opportunity to everyone to speak. And my next speaker in the list is Mr. Anvarkhon Umar Kodjaev, Deputy Head of the Department for Monitoring National Goals and Targets in the field of sustainable development and analysis of living standards of the population, Ministry of Economic Development and Poverty Reduction of Uzbekistan. So the floor is yours, please.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники.
Distinguished participants, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers of the forum, which is of course very useful exercise considering the current situation of pandemic. This helps us to exchange opinions, and according presentations we were exposed to, every expert gave us some important highlights, which is a good platform for our further developments in sustainable development monitoring. We have to continue SDGs monitoring, which even under pandemic proved that the sustainable development goals are our long-term benchmark, and even under the pandemic circumstances, these are very important roadmap for development. Integration of national goals and targets with SDGs is very important, and we are trying to do our best to include SDGs into our regional and national development plans. No one left behind is our main motto also. We also have to provide integrated finance, mobilizing governmental resources for SDGs implementation. Because anyway, every country has to consider their respective budget with the view on SDGs and pandemic environment. Also developing annual parameters with respect of SDGs. We also have to take these parameters into consideration while developing state projects. And number 4, we have to continue capacity building in terms of collecting accurate statistical data, which would give us transparent indicators, which would give us further opportunity to integrate our statistical standard with the international one. And every country, this would be a regular exercise, i.e. determining their target parameters on SDGs indicators until 2030. And also the motto, "No one left behind," should lead us to better civic and international organizations and non-governmental, non-commercial partners' involvement for SDGs implementation. And also,
данного форума является то, что
take away from this forum is that having listened to many speakers who presented their or who made their presentations, is that under conditions of the pandemic, it would be quite helpful for us because the international experience that we overtake here in the international forum can be applied there in our country. And I'm really grateful for this to the organizers of this forum. Thank you.
For concrete proposals and for moving forward as follow-up to the SDG forum. Definitely, I think we will take into account these proposals. Thank you. Next speaker in my list is Mr. Andrei Pantileev, Head of Economic Policy Strategies Section, Macroeconomic Policy Department, Eurasian Economic Commission. The floor is yours. Please, Andrei.
Спасибо, Николай Николаевич.
Thank you, Nikolai Nikolaevich, distinguished participants of the forum. Once again, the Commission is taking part in sub-regional forum of UNESCAP for SDGs, and we can say that every year the forum is evolving, and it's really high-level forum. And this year, so due to the pandemic, so the agenda was really very topical. For us, it was interesting to hear the position not only of our partners, the Eurasian Economic Union, but the opinion of business, non-commercial organizations, and experts. We would like to say that the current crisis showed a significant role of healthcare system globally and identified its weak points, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. And this should be taken into consideration when developing long-term development areas or priorities. And second, that I would like to emphasize is that the pandemic just highlighted the issue of forming dialogue platforms to discuss coordination of actions. And these platforms should be of different formats, and different participants should take part in this. This may be just global platforms between integration associations and governments, and like of local type, platforms of local types for like stakeholders, local stakeholders, ministries of economy, ministry of healthcare, and so on. And third, the result of the global and regional dialogue should be a conversion of the positions of the leading global nations and international economies, national economies, and development of both policy and economy. And maybe some years later, we will be able just to see the coherence of the regional initiatives and a global strategy of like SDGs are. In conclusion, I would like to say that in spite of economic drop that we observe everywhere, sustainable development goals are really topical both for us and for UNESCAP region. And some of them even become more topical and relevant, like 3, 9, and 17 SDGs. So thank you for this opportunity to speak up, to provide our view. Thank you to all the organizers and participants of the forum.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Eurasian Economic Commission is really very important partner of ESCAP, with whom we have existing MOU, And your point regarding the forging of dialogue platforms, I think it's really very important and very, especially during the COVID-19. I must tell you that ESCAP also promoting this idea and currently undertaking a number of regional conversations. So we have already concluded 3 conversations on different issues of the regional cooperation, and we have 3 more ahead. So we will be happy if participants will join these conversations. Thank you very much. Next in my list of speakers is Ms. Gulmira Kazakunova, Chair, Public Association, Union of People with Disabilities, Равенство, Executive Director, Association of People with Disabilities from Kyrgyzstan. Please, Gulmira.
Добрый день, уважаемые организаторы и участники 4-го субрегиона.
Distinguished participants of the 4th North and Central Asian Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Implementation of SDGs. Thank you for this opportunity to talk. From my presentation yesterday, you could hear about the situation of men and women with disabilities. You should take into consideration that I am rather independent. I have education, I have my work and all that. But what can be said about people without education or people with disabilities who cannot just pay for personal assistant? Yes, they are just left behind now. And I would like to raise the issue, which is important for all the people with disability. This is implementation of a convention on rights of people with disabilities, which would be able to resolve many issues of people with disabilities. And I would say that our concerns and the issues of men and women with disability and the principle of inclusiveness should be integrated into further activities and review of the 2030 agenda. And I would say in conclusion that each of us is able just to resolve the issues of people with disabilities so that they would not be left behind. Thank you very much.
Спасибо, Гульмира.
Thank you, Gulmira. In effect, you shared your experience, and for us, it was a life example when you just communicated your situation that you experienced, a personal situation. This just shows that much should be done in each country so that the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities would work. Because in my opinion, we are at the beginning of this path, and the measures that are taken in our countries are not sufficient. And the pandemic showed that actually the measures that were taken and started functioning during the pandemic found themselves almost without any control. So they just went beyond the control. And without volunteers, many people would be left behind, as you said. And it is necessary to pay attention to these issues and concerns. And from our part, we will make everything possible to draw attention of decision makers at political level in all our countries of North and Central Asia. Thank you. The next on my list
Cities Center from Russian Federation. Please, Artyom.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. I believe that this forum helped us all to feel reconnected, and I'm glad to be the part of it and feel very thankful to organizers for the invitation. COVID crisis made the problem of inequality more visible. More than that, it raised the awareness of the health and well-being issues everywhere, especially in urban areas. A closer look can give us an insight that the way urbanization works now, and especially the way mobility priorities are distributed, also brings health damage. It just happens very slowly. Some cities showed the leadership and the inspiration to change the situation. And they decided to start the process of reshaping mobility to help the people to be more physically active and move around the city safer and better. The tools they chose for this way was developing pedestrian and cycling infrastructure. Just for beginning, it is just the first step in the reshaping urban mobility in common, and investing in public transport, implementing the conception of 15-minute cities where you can access many things you need in your life in a very short period of time, in just a quarter of an hour, and providing access for movement to everyone should follow the process sooner. Doesn't really matter what the region and country is. And I believe that some of the topics and some of this point, which are really highlighted in SDG, were also sounded by different speakers during this forum, which makes me happy about this fact. Thank you.
Thank you, Artyom. Next in the list of speakers is a representative from FAO, Mr. Viorel Gutu, FAO representative in Turkey and sub-regional coordinator for Central Asia. Please, Viorel, the floor is yours.
Yeah, dear colleagues, participants, distinguished colleagues from the region, it's a great pleasure to be with you today, and thank you very much for this opportunity. I'd like to comment very briefly on sustainable food systems and healthy nutrition patterns. Today, probably in this closing session, Nikolai, you mentioned very in detail this subject. I'll try to focus on very few of them. As a FAO, we emphasize the importance of adopting a food systems approach for delivering healthy and nutritious diets. Accordingly, it is working with other agencies in the cross-UN issues-based coalition on sustainable food systems. And we are also supporting the Global Food Systems Summit being planned by the UN Secretary General for the next year. It is widely recognized that food systems in North and Central Asia are not delivering healthy and nutritious diets. Progress in improving nutrition seems to have stalled, while the incidence of obesity and non-communicable diseases is rising rapidly in most of the countries. And inequality in access to food is a major underlying factor, as are unhealthy eating habits. For food systems to work well, improved governance, system thinking, policy coherence, and coordination are required, as is better data, evidence, and multi-sectoral analysis, and also evidence-based, inclusive, multi-stakeholder policy dialogue. A comprehensive agricultural development strategy is a key element in achieving policy coherence and coordination based on evidence and inclusive dialogue. In this context, in the respective session, it was highlighted the need to recognize and include women as key stakeholders in food systems if these systems are to deliver healthy and nutritious diets. And you, Nikolai, mentioned about that. The COVID-19 epidemic has exacerbated the existing issues with food systems in the region. Yet, the shock can also help the region build back better. Investment in agriculture will be of critical importance here, but this investment has to be of the right kind, focusing on rural infrastructure, basic research, value chain development, and other public goods that the market cannot supply. This will also help reduce the extreme dependence of some countries on agricultural trade and remittances which heightens their vulnerability to shocks. As FAO, we are currently actively working to make food systems more sustainable and resilient in the region, including in the context of COVID-19 epidemic. A system for monitoring the impact of COVID-19 is being implemented. Work is proceeding on food systems, obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases, and the development of evidence-based dietary guidelines. I'd like to mention some other activities: analysis of agricultural development strategies and policies frameworks, gender strategies, digital agriculture strategy. FAO is also partnering with member states in the region to reduce food loss and waste and promote food safety. To promote better use and management of natural resources, FAO is working in partnership with GEF and GCF to implement a large number of projects in North and Central Asia. In conclusion, I'd like to thank again the organizers for this forum and for the opportunity to speak. I'm sure that everything which we discuss, everything which we try to do is for the benefits, not only for us living today, but also for future generations. Over to you, Nicola. Colleagues.
Thank you very much, VRL, for very important remarks, concluding remarks on all sessions, and especially session organized jointly with FAO. And I really very much grateful for your contribution to the success of the forum and for our close partnership in preparation of several sessions. Really very much obliged. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Вам тоже спасибо, Николай.
Спасибо. Next speaker in my list is representative of UNDP, Ms. Agi Veres, Deputy Regional Director and Deputy Assistant Administrator, Regional Bureau for Europe and the CIS countries, UNDP. Please, the floor is yours, Agi Veres. Please.
And it's my pleasure to be here also at the closing when I participated at the opening. I also would like to thank ESCAP and the organizers for partnering for this initiative. And I think your summary was really an opening to just make a few short comments from my side in response to the question that you posed to us. First of all, I think we have seen that as the countries are seeking to reopen, the SDGs really offer us a chance to build forwards better. So the question is, how are we including a renewed focus on this integration that will bring together economic diversification and a reduced dependence on fossil fuels, widen social safety net, digital investments, more resilient and diverse supply chain, and the strengthened regional connectivity. So I think all of these things will need to come together if we want to take the agenda forward. And the need to focus on the missing middle that I mentioned in my opening, which I have heard coming back from other speakers as well. In terms of the transformation that's happening in the countries that we have been discussing, technological transformation and sped up of digitalization will be one of the key aspects that we have to focus on, and we have to support the countries. A few other things, and then I'll finish there. We have seen and we need to address the challenges and opportunities for women and girls, and the specific needs to address the increased vulnerabilities of older people, people with disabilities, youth, women, and migrants. So I'm looking forward to working with all the countries in the region on these issues and with the partners that have shared their thoughts today and the last couple of days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Agi, for good remarks, and I use this opportunity also to express our gratitude for great contribution of UNDP for the success of the forum. Thank you. I also would like to give the floor to our another very good partner contributed to the success of this forum, Ms. Berta Sela, Deputy Regional Director, UN Women, Europe and Central Asia. So the floor is yours, Berta, please.
Thank you very much. I'm using this kudos for the first time. So thank you to the organizers. It's been a privilege to be part of this important event. I would like to express our appreciation to ESCAP, to the UN family partners for making sure that women are highlighted at the forefront of the pandemic and turning the COVID challenge responses into opportunities for building more inclusive, more equitable, more sustainable economies. You've made my job much easier here, Mr. Nicolai, since you highlighted in your concluding remarks how women are at the forefront of the responses and the importance, again, of gender equality. And we're very privileged to work with all of you to provide, to engage in sustainable solutions that put gender equality at the forefront. I'm not going to go back into the evidence on how important gender equality is to building more inclusive economies, especially now, given that many of the economic sectors have been hard hit, and we have really strong evidence that shows that how women and girls are disproportionately impacted, and how by including them in the responsive will help us recover faster and better from this crisis. I would like to highlight 3 recommendations that have come clearly across many of the sessions. One is that even though we do have some data and evidence that UN Women has been also leading through the rapid gender assessments together with our UN partners on the impact of COVID-19, there is still at large a lack of sex disaggregated data and gender statistics, especially for vulnerable populations, for addressing the intersectionalities, including, for example, looking at age, ethnicity, race, migration status, disability, wealth. All of these aspects are very important to understand better the pandemic's differential impacts on women and girls. Secondly, we call all of the partners in the region to really ensure, building on this data and evidence, to ensure that the socioeconomic response plans, recovery plans address directly the specific vulnerabilities and the needs and the commitments for gender-related SDG targets, for this to become a priority. And we are very excited to continue to partner with all of you. Third, the financing is really critical to ensure that we leave no one behind. And it is imperative that gender equality dimensions are embedded in the national fiscal stimulus packages as we design, as we're engaging in designing the national responses to the COVID pandemic. And finally, I would also like to emphasize that women have been innovating through both traditional and non-traditional sectors. They have been bringing key cutting-edge solutions for survival, for recovery, for responses. And it's really critical that we support the women's ideas, the women's knowledge, their efforts for investments, including through startup fundings, since we are going to be seeing a much higher benefit. And it's really critical that we put them at the center of addressing this digital divide that it was referred to earlier, as well as the financial inclusion. I would like to end by thanking all of you again, dear partners. Desperate times call for creative measures, and I'm really looking very much forward to continuing the partnership with all of you to ensure that the gender equality remains at the heart of building inclusive, sustainable, and resilient development. Thank you.
Thank you, Berta. Thank you for bringing attention to these important issues. And I think we really need to strengthen our efforts for gender equality and gender mainstreaming. We every SDG forum we provide analysis of the participants, including gender. So, and we will do this time. And I would like to use this opportunity to thank you and your colleagues, UN Women, for great contribution to the success of this forum. Next in my list of the speakers, Ms. Krista Picard, UNESCO Director of Almaty Cluster Office for Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. Krista, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Nikolai. Dear participants, dear colleagues, I would like to start by expressing my appreciation on behalf of UNESCO about this partnership that was forged with ESCAP on the organization of this 4th SDG forum. And thank all ESCAP colleagues on the excellent organization. You really did a great job over these past 3 days. So when I look back to this forum, and especially as regards education, there are perhaps 4 messages that I would like to highlight, and which you actually, Nikolai, already conveyed very eloquently. The first message for education is that the COVID-19 pandemic is also an education crisis. But our message is that change is possible. We believe that we can seize this opportunity to find new ways to address the learning crisis and revamp our education system so that they become more resilient. And for that, we need, of course, strategic dialogue, strengthened collective action, but also not to lose sight of the commitment that we had made in 2015 to achieve SDG 4, which is pertaining to quality education. The second message is that the socio-economic shock of COVID-19 will definitely have negative impacts on education spending in the medium and long term. And it will exacerbate the already large funding gap to achieve SDG 4. So it's important that we maintain a very strong political commitment and investment in education, both as regards domestic spending as well as official development assistance. The third message concerns quality and connectivity. We need to expand the definition of the right to education to include connectivity, because we see that now education actually happens online. But we also need to develop quality content and skills for teachers, learners, and parents and caregivers. And it is important to always put teachers at the center, because we know that when we want to achieve quality education, then teachers play a crucial role in that. And my last and fourth message concerns inclusion and equity, which I believe must be the guiding principles of every educational response. This is why UNESCO calls on all stakeholders to act in partnership for inclusive and equitable solutions, and so that we make sure that no one is left behind, especially the vulnerable groups. There is a growing concern that if these learners are not properly supported, then they will never return to school. And this would further exacerbate pre-existing disparities and risk reversing the progress on SDG 4 as well as other SDGs. And as you so rightly pointed out, Nikolai, education is not only a fundamental human right. It is an enabling right with direct impact on the realization of other human rights. And it's also the primary driver of progress across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, hence its importance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Krista. I think you are absolutely right, highlighting the importance of education issues. I think we need to strengthen our cooperation in this area, taking into account our positive cooperation in disaster risk reduction. Yeah. So thank you. And my gratitude for great contribution of UNESCO and you personally to the organization and preparation of the forum. Next speaker in my list is Mr. Talgat Umarjanov, ILO National Coordinator in the Republic of Kazakhstan. Talgat, the floor is yours, please.
Добрый день, уважаемые участники.
Distinguished participants, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the fourth North and Central Asia Multi-Stakeholder Forum is coming to an end. And I just listened to that, and I'm sure that all participants and our colleagues from UN and all stakeholders made great contribution into all organization on organizing this. So the program was really very big, take into consideration all issues of COVID. I would just share my opinion on session number 5, sustainable, inclusive and resilient economies. So we were we were addressing COVID-19 epidemic's impact. Declaration of Millennium was adopted, which contains a call to implement a social mandate in the field of social equality through a human-oriented approach to the future of labor sphere. As you can see, today the situation is so difficult versus 2019 when the declaration was adopted. But ILO and its and its members, as well as Association of Employers and Trade Unions, play important role in counteracting this coronavirus outbreak and its impact on workplaces. We expect that it will be quite an uncertain and not complete recovery by 2020. So the world may see even harder, even harder situation. So, and the success will depend on the choices of the governments. And we suggest that such a powerful mechanism could be used as social partnership and social cooperation as a basis, because so really very important solutions and decisions should be made in the society through this mechanism. And today we can see that ILO is underpinned by 4 principles: counteracting COVID-19 crisis, which is based on international labor standards and convention. So the first principle is to encourage economy and employment. Monetary policy, credit policy, crediting and financial support of industries and economic sectors. Second, support of enterprises and incomes. So that means to take measures to preserve employment and to provide tax, financial, and other benefits to enterprises. 3 is labor safety measures. To improve labor safety measures, maybe just to transition to remote work, access to healthcare for everyone, access to paid leaves for everyone. And principle number 4 is social dialogue as a basis, which I mentioned. it would be necessary to improve and enhance potential and sustainability of employers, employees, and government. So meaning that strengthening of institutes and social dialogue in labor negotiations. Only through the dialogue, a worker or an employee can be implemented in practice. Even prior to the pandemic, international community committed itself to follow and foster global changes in the sphere of labor. So we're talking about this declaration and this Millennium Declaration. So which sets the agenda. I'm not going to talk about it. So today our colleague, Mr. Ramiro Pizarra, described the situation quite well, and as well as our mandate and our and the sphere of our work in the region. We work with all the countries, but try to cover the majority, as many countries as we can. But it is deteriorated by coronavirus situation. So this forum called us just to share innovative decisions and just to think about our commitments. I would like to thank once again the organizers of the forum and congratulate you with the successful work of the forum, and we have to continue this work. Our work should go on. Thank you. Thank you, Talgat. Thank you for your remarks. I think the principles that you mentioned are really important. The main thing is just that they are followed and observed. And I would take this chance and to thank you for your contribution to the success of our joint forum on SDG. Thank you very much.
Of speakers, another partner from UNEP, Mr. Aljas Atemtayev, National Program Officer, UNEP Central Asia Office. Please, the floor is yours, Aljas.
Yes, can you hear me well?
We can hear you. Yeah, please.
Да, большое спасибо. Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники форума.
Good afternoon, distinguished participants of the forum. Let me, on behalf of UNEP, to thank the organizers of the forum, our colleagues from UNESCAP and other stakeholders. It was really great to attend this forum. Big work was conducted for this, to organize this, and I would like to focus on several issues that were touched upon by other participants. The first one, of course, is just progress on SDG 13. Just to take urgent measures to counteract climate change and its consequences, because with the pandemic will be overcome and we can witness the progress, but still the issue of climate change is rather acute. And as countries are going to rebuild their economies, it's important that recovery measures are formed, taking into consideration sustainability of the economy, but with cautious attitude toward environment, so that the countries would improve lives of their citizens, but without damage for future generations. So this includes green economy models, programs on SDG 12, implementation of rational use of natural resources, and there was what our colleagues from ILO mentioned, so creation of green workplaces and organizing of the existing and implementation of the existing work process. Second, I would like just to mention what was mentioned by our colleague from UNESCO. So SDG 4, quality education for all categories of population, implementation of technologies, and involving young people into decision making. It's not a secret that like fostering and education are the basis to improve life of the society. Specifically important that issue just becomes this year when schools were closed according to UNESCO's estimation, 9 of 10 pupils who did not just lost their chance to visit schools. And it's important not just only to develop school infrastructure, education infrastructure, but just to think about content. So that skills and knowledge are obtained not only to get better job, but to become a decent citizen, to understand what we produce, what we consume, and how we form our mentality. And SDGs 16 and 17, so international cooperation, which was managed by our development banks and the Eurasian Economic Union. It's important to support integration processes and to focus on international cooperation, because it's obvious that no country will be able to overcome the pandemic or climate change, and we understand that only SDGs can be implemented only on the basis of strong partnership relations. And it's important that integration processes would be developed not only through economic links, but through cultural exchange, through observance of human rights. All international integration processes just have an impact on all the global processes. Thank you very much for this opportunity to attend the forum.
Remarks. And I also would like to use this opportunity to thank UNEP and all your colleagues, IDAI and others for great contribution to the success of SDG Forum. We will continue our cooperation on all issues raised during this forum. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, distinguished participants, we come to the final stage of our closing session. I think you had opportunity to listen the concluding remarks of all participants who wanted to share, and speakers who participated in the sessions. I think they are really very important and will be taken into account for preparation of our final report. And once again, I would like to use this opportunity to express our gratitude, sincere gratitude to all member states from North and Central Asia and our neighbors, including Turkey, Iran, and others who participated in SDG Forum. I would like to express special gratitude to our partner organizations and financial institutions like Eurasian Economic Commission, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Economic Cooperation Organization, Eurasian Development Bank, Asian Investment Bank, and non-government organizations, academia. I would like to express our gratitude to interpreters who did a great job for the forum. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to ESCAP and SONCA colleagues who did all preparatory work, and our technical staff who organized this CUDA platform and YouTube and so on and so on. So for everyone, we are very much grateful. And before concluding, I would like to give the floor to Natalia for housekeeping remarks. Natalia, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much. I will not keep you here much longer, just two very short announcements. We have posted the link to our forum webpage into the YouTube chat. You can access all recordings of all the sessions there. And also we would like to request you to complete the evaluation questionnaire. The link is also posted in the chat, and all registered participants will receive it by email as well. From my side, Thank you very much, everybody, and yeah, have a great rest of the day.
So all the best. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.